Hey everybody, it's your buddy Beard late to making tutorials, and this one is a video I promised ages back at this point. It's a promise that's almost as old as the tower itself. Okay, maybe not that old. I had wanted to make this pretty early on for those that really needed a hand with the overall combat within Monster Hunter. Obviously that didn't happen, so 2 scripts later, here I am loosely talking to you over a hunt that I did against a Dodogama. Dodo is definitely not a very taxing monster to fight, but he does help with getting down the basics of the game as you really get into the higher ranks. After certain events, you're basically in high ranks immediately, so from this point on, it's a matter of maxing out your gear and getting ready to wallop some monsters a few dozen times more. I do want to start off with preparation, however. Prep is just as important, if not more so, than the hunt itself. I know we kind of talked about it last video, but just bear with me because that's how much I need to stress some of these points. Going into combat without proper drinks like hot or cold, defense and attack, health potions or traps, herbs, coatings if you're a gunner, oh for guild's sake, bring those. Well, the list goes on in cases of what items you need to really bring, but it's effectively up to you to know which ones to bring along to a fight, and it's also dependent on your own skill. The most important items are potions, rations, since they're so easy to get from oven roast, but we'll get there in a moment, hot or cold drinks, antidotes, and arguably traps. Yeah, you know what, we need to talk about that for a second. Traps are super duper important for a number of reasons. They're not just there for keeping a good monster down all the time, though that's part of it. Until you set a shock trap down for a lightning monster and you find it doesn't do anything, and then you just look at the trap all disappointed. Traps are also needed for capturing monsters, along with these handy-dandy items called trank bombs. Shock traps are made from a thunderbug and a trap tool. Pitfall traps are made with a net and a trap tool, and trank bombs are made with a sleep herb and a parashroom. The only one that's a bit cryptic is the pitfall trap, as the net requires you to have ivy and a spider web, so while you're out on a hunt, you'll want to keep an eye out for these items. Stockpiling them is far from a bad thing. I mentioned in my last video to stock up on trap tools, and this is mainly because you can't craft them, and obtaining them is a bit of a pain. I mean, 200 zenny also isn't that bad to just buy the things. I'll just buy them already. You'll also want to take advantage of loadouts, especially out in the field. I'll explain what I mean a little later, but by pressing options, you'll be able to check out the menu while inside your collections box. This will allow you to quickly change out your items for a different set, or place items you've obtained from a hunt back into the box quickly. It really does speed up the process, and you have pages full of empty and open loadout slots for different weapons and situations. You can even name them if you want to. Speaking of, this can also be done for armor and weapons as well, so once you find something that really works, set it as a loadout. There's no reason not to make this easy on yourself. Be efficient with what you bring. You can only bring 2 trap tools with you on a hunt, so 1 thunderbug and a net makes for 2 more traps in addition to the other traps you bring along. You can also opt to do 2 thunderbugs for 2 shock traps, or 2 nets for 2 pitfall traps. It's up to you, and it also depends on the monster. Once those spots are used, however, you'll have the spaces free again, so this is why I limit what I bring with these items. Getting back to other consumables, a lot of times armor can offset the need for max potions or ancient potions, but these are pretty important since they increase your overall maximum health by another 50 points, the same effect as the cook. These are extremely important to take along for more difficult and more challenging hunts, or especially to offset your armor if it's not quite up to snuff. Right, cooking. Let's talk about this for a moment, since there might be some of you out there that may want some meal advice. It depends on the weapon you're using and the monster you're fighting, but if you want a safe bet, going with attack and defense is always a great way to launch yourself into a hunt properly. These boosts can save your life. Oftentimes, it's not about you getting a one-shot kill from a monster, it's from how many hits you end up taking from them, with a few exceptions from some hits, like Nergigante's dive bomb attack. Ugh, that's a nasty one. As a side note, if you need help taking some hits a bit more, make sure to grab up something with divine protection on it. If you pre-ordered, there is a charm that has this innately on it, but if you didn't, there are other armor and charm sets out there that may have this effect on them. It's a good skill to look into if you're learning a fight or otherwise. Take note of that. When it comes to eating, keep in mind the ingredients that you eat, as this does directly affect what it is that you get in terms of boosts, be it attack or defense. More for instance, if you eat 2 meats, you get a small attack boost. Eat 4, you get a medium. Eat 6, you get a large attack boost. The more fresh ingredients you eat as well, the more you end up gaining in that health and stamina boost, at least as a base level, and that keeps you away from utilizing more of your max potions and wasting a lot of materials that way. So it does help to definitely eat a meal. Anyway, you want to look at the boosts given down here with the feline aspect of the meal just as much as up here with the effects of the meal itself, either in boosts or otherwise. If you're not sure what these skills do from the feline end, don't forget to hit the touchpad or its equivalent on the Xbox controller to see the skills. Go through this list and see if you can find a skill that may help you on your next hunt, or at least increases drops of money, items, or otherwise. There is absolutely no reason not to eat, and performing quests to get more ingredients is vital, especially when you can do it at the camp now in a hunt. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The last couple things to really check on in town are your bounties, investigations, and research progress. I would also recommend, once it's unlocked for you, to always check the Master Botanist for your harvesting needs. I generally make sure to come back every other hunt to ensure I can maximize the amount of items I can receive from this vendor. Lastly is something I don't have shown in this video, but don't forget about your tail riders. They unlock later, and they're very handy for some lower ranking parts, instead of you needing to actually go out and hunt for them, and you might be impressed with what they come back with. The Argosy is a trade ship that also comes into port once in a while to trade some goods. That's another good thing to check back in on town from time to time. To sum up, check your major vendors, eat a meal, prep your items, know what you're hunting, and always set stuff to your wish list. Right, I should mention that. At the smithy, it's a good idea to set up a wish list. If you're after certain items, it'll help you track them down and make it easier for you to know when you have a new piece of equipment ready to upgrade or otherwise. It's a handy-dandy feature that I highly recommend taking advantage of. I mean, you could just use paper and pencil, but save a tree? The game is about nature and balance and stuff after all. Ignore the fact that the tree is already dead for the paper, okay? Anyway, now that we're done with prep 2 pages into this, let's get out to that Dodogama fight. I chose this fight only because it's a very easy one to grasp in the higher rank hunts, but it shows off an important status effect that we need to talk about. Going into combat and not knowing how to deal with blast is a big deal. A couple final notes about the camp, however. In case you forget something in town, you can stop off at a tent in a main camp and head inside. Here, this list allows you to change equipment, manage your inventory, pick up items you forgot, well, basically anything you could do in town. It's a great addition to the franchise and really does help you keep chaining hunts or stay out on more lengthy expeditions as well, especially for expeditions. Oh man, I can't tell you how often I just go out on a hunt, especially in the Rotten Vale, for parts and items or monsters. Having this to drop off my items and refill later on is a super handy tool. Even on potions, if I get too low on a long hunt, the list of useful instances for this is uncountable in Monster Hunter's caves. I also mentioned earlier that you can eat in a camp as well, so use the canteen whenever able. Really, the only thing you can't do in the camp is check your vendors, tail riders, the botanist, make new equipment. Okay, well, there's a lot of stuff you can't do, but that's why the wish list is a great tool to utilize. Another thing you can do both in town and at the camp is oven roast. This is handy for making some monster parts into meat that you can eat later on. This is how I get a lot of my rations and other cooked meats, and saves a lot of time for me to farm up a lot of raw meat from lesser herbivore monsters to make into well-done steaks. Okay, promise no more prep talk, let's go slap this Dodogama around. I don't have this monster's research level very high just yet, but my scout flies are smart enough to track it down almost immediately. At the start of the hunt, you may find a large collection of scout flies head in a certain direction. Follow them if your only goal is to hunt down the monster. There are instances where you may not want to hunt down the monster directly, like in investigations, where mining, herbing, and other gathering nodes may have increased production. In these cases, you may want to go check them out and gather some more materials. Grabbing up research points like footprints or otherwise, even after you've maxed out research on a monster, can occasionally reward you with items. It's worth interacting with the larger nodes especially. I'll Take Angenoth's Mucus as a good example. Yuck, but sometimes you get a scale or two. After you find the monster, however, it's pretty well open season. I will say not to push off gathering throughout your hunts, however. There's plenty of time to do so, and even if a monster is eating or sleeping, you generally have enough time to get to them. There are a few instances this isn't going to happen, like a Rathalos going to the treetops and you're on ground floor of the forest on a complete opposite side of the map. Yeah, haul it. Of course, the question that should be asked is, where should you be attacking on the monster? Here's the thing to remember. Where you hit is extremely important for breaking apart, chopping off a tail, cracking a frill or jaw, the list goes on. If it looks like you can break it or cut it, take a guess about it for your first couple of hunts, or check it out online. Personally, I love being able to go in blind and see if I can figure out what parts do break or sever on a monster. Generally, it's about the same parts for all monsters, however, so the guessing game gets pretty constant pretty fast. When you also break apart, you might find the little blue shinies on the ground too. But there's other reasons to focus on a monster's limbs. The head is a, normally, very weak point on a monster, but it's not always the best target. When a monster charges, this obviously means the first point that will hit is in the head. If you're near it, down goes the hunter. Sometimes, however, in cases of Diablos, Lavasioth, and a few other monsters, you'll be hip-checked, so you need to be mindful of side attacks. Knowing these tells is half the battle with a monster. After a while, you'll be able to pick up on them, being that they're all fairly similar amongst most monsters, which can be a bit disappointing, but the other attacks that monsters have generally make up for that. Hitting a monster's legs will eventually topple the monster on its side, but going for the back leg is generally a better tactic for this when available. Otherwise, it's probably one of two choices for the legs. Certain monsters have some tougher hides, however, in cases of Angenoth, where it takes some time to wear down the top layer of scales. After you break that down, you'll notice that damage numbers and the ability to topple the monster increases exponentially. Stunning is also a major part of the conversation, but few weapons can do this. Hunting Horn, Hammer, and Charge Blade are easily the three most powerful weapons to stun a monster. You'll know you're hitting for stun damage by seeing the stars form around a monster's head. And yes, to my knowledge, the only place to stun a monster is on the head. I mean, it makes sense when you're trying to brain something with a blunt object. Hammers and bagpipes have a big weakness, however, and that is that they can't carve off monster parts. Tails are a major miss in this case. Some monsters have their tails still able to be carved after killing them, and sometimes with a capture, but most times that carve can yield some extra rewards. For instance, an Angenoth can drop some of its high-rank material from carving the tail, but it first, of course, has to be chopped off with a bladed weapon. Knowing this or keeping it in mind on a hunt really helps you to figure out two weapon sets, one that you can carve and one that you can stun, or at least you can choose to do that. That's completely up to you. It should be noted though that hammers and bagpipes do have the capability that they can break things a little easier than some other weapons. For instance, bladed weapons are very good for tails, and that's one of the benefits of them, but a hammer can go ahead and break the frill on a monster a little easier than, say, a sword can. There are different reasons for each weapon, which, of course, is part of the plan to begin with. Before I forget to mention it, Blast is a really annoying status effect. You'll see it with the little flame up here by your status effect counter for your character. If you're hit while you have the blast effect on you, it'll cause even more damage in addition to the hit taken from the initial monster's blow. Now, this has caused a couple of one-shots for me in previous games, so I strongly suggest listening up for this point. The way to get rid of Blast is roll 3 times. That's it. It's just a matter that 3 rolls can really sap a lot of your stamina, so be mindful of it while you roll around and dodge attacks besides. If you're too slow removing the effect, it will still blow up and cause a ton of damage. Be very mindful of your status effect bar, especially even when rolling through, say, lava from Dodogama, which is the reason that I decided to fight him and prove a point. Alright, one more big thing, and that's positioning. Where you position against a monster can greatly matter. Depending what weapon you also have in team hunts really makes a big difference as well. For instance, let's go back to our discussion about hammers and bagpipes. I keep calling them bagpipes, but you know what I mean, but the pun just kills me. If you're using hunting horn, charge blade, or hammer, then you should be going for the head. The charge blade should especially be going after the head when they switch to axe mode, at least if their blade assists with blunt hits. Keep that in mind if you're a dual sworder, long sworder, pretty much anything else. A sword and shield can also deal some blunt damage on shield strikes, which is pretty darn awesome and versatile, but keep in mind that blunt damage is very low compared to these bigger hitters. A charge blade's full charge hit can near one-shot stun a monster. Give them way and keep your blades away from them when they go into performing these big hits. There's no magic number to worry about when it comes to breaking off monster parts. This is why the research book and Hunter's Field Manual are excellent tools that I can't stress enough to use. Between setting a wish list, knowing what parts are accessible through what body parts you break, you'll start to really take over a monster and get its equipment in no time. And now that I think about it, there are two other points that I should mention. One, very quickly, is mounting. To mount a monster, you just need to leap from anywhere that's higher up, and it could be a smaller little platform, or it could be a larger one. You just need to basically swing down on top of the monster, and if it's hard enough hit, you'll mount them. The largest thing that I'm finding, though, it's better to actually change position almost no matter what they do, and to almost completely ignore the brace option. I haven't really found too much use for it, especially if you have higher grade earplugs or anything like that. When you see parts of your outer screen start to fade or kind of seem like they're getting that vignette effect, you'll want to basically move. Just hit the joystick and move to a different spot. Especially though if you're using something like hammer, you'll want to wind up the hit a little bit more and then topple the monster with a good effective stun hit. After the monster's down on the ground, it's usually enough that you can go ahead and get another combo on them. They're stunned. The amount of time that they are on the ground is amazing when you end up getting the stun combo off. And the last thing I should mention is doing investigations when they're available. It's a hugely important way to increase the parts you gain. If you look at an investigation window, you'll see a ton of different information from previous quest postings that are a bit different from the norm. You'll want to look over this information as well as see what other rewards are available, indicated by the question marks in either bronze, silver, or gold. The higher the ranking, in this case, the better guaranteed the reward is. Sometimes these are great sources of zenny, sometimes it's monster parts or gathering rewards. Take advantage of setting up investigation hunts. They're definitely better than just continuously doing the optional hunts. Whew, another load of information down, and we haven't even looked over the weapons yet within the game, at least outside of the hammers a little bit as kind of a spoiler. I'm anxious to do that, actually, since it gives me even more reason to get more proficient with each weapon again, and I hope you guys are looking forward to those. I'll be doing a bit of a twist with each one as well, at least where applicable. For now, if you enjoyed this little combat and prep tutorial, then you know the buttons to press, along with subscribing to hear more from me later on. Until next time, hunters, I thank you for listening to me ramble, and I do hope this helps your hunts, even if I am a bit late with this. Until next hunt, keep your blades sharp and your senses keen. Take care.